So we start. So we start here and zoomed all the way out. So let's just go ahead and turn on the southern microscope. Alright, so let's get this focus. So we'll be able to see the two chambers for the Corpora cavernosa. And a single section of corpus spongiosum. Alright, now we're in business. So the urethra is this canal. So that's the spongy urethra, it's just that space. And we see this pink tissue surrounding it here. So this is now the structure, the corpus spongiosum that surrounds the spongy urethra. And now you see that there's these two sections here. There's one portion and a second portion. All together, this is the Corpora cavernosa. Or the singular form, if we're just talking about just one, that's the corpus cavernosum. And now you see the pink layer wrapped around it. So this pink layer is the tunica albuginea. Or you see that pink layer even wrapped around here as well.
It's just thinner.
It's a little thinner. So you got the two sections, Corpora cavernosa. You see that really thick tunica albuginea wrapped around it. Corpus spongiosum containing the spongy urethra. Overall, it's kind of sad.
That's what I thought.
It's sad face. It's like the opposite of my chin, right? It's like it's.
What was inside the tunica albuginea? Yeah.
This pink portion here, and then inside.
Yeah.
Inside we have this portion is the Corpora cavernosa.
Thank you.
Corpus is for one.
Corpus is for one. Yeah, corpus is singular. See, that one looks more like a happy face. Got eyes, mouth.
Is that why you wear that pin today?
Alright, so you're able to understand this? What we're looking
I'm
at?
having trouble reading my writing.
On this view, you see the two sections, the, what's it called? Corpora cavernosa, and wrapped around it here, especially really thick. That's right, the tunic, the collagenous sheath, and canal, the space in here. That's the urethra, specifically the spongy urethra, surrounded by the corpus spongiosum. So our first sample. Continuing with the male reproductive system. So the okay, so this image shows them side by side. So we can point out here, running at an angle, this is the collagenous sheath. And on this side, we're looking at the testis on this side. And then down here is a view of the epididymis. And we'll zoom in closer on each and see more detail. But just a wide view to see both. So again, that view just for the testes appearance, and I think it's probably just going in closer and closer. Yeah, we could do all this right from the microscope. All right, let's switch over. So in this area, we're just looking at the region inside the testis. And you see a lot of these open tubes. All the different rings that we're looking at are seminiferous tubules. And within these seminiferous tubules, all these open rings, you have a cross-section through this very, very long tube. This is a location where sperm cells are created. This is where the stem cell activity occurs to create sperm cells. So in the testes, all these rings and seminiferous tubules. Whereas now over here, we've got a cross that, just like the picture I showed you, crossing that collagenous sheath, and it's now over here is the epididymis. So let's go back to the testes, zoom in a little closer. All right, so that's just like that photo. All right, so we have what's this thing in the middle here? Right. So let's go this way into the testis. This is a good view for what we need. So we need to see what? Seminiferous tubules.
Spermatocytes.
And interstitial cells. Okay, so the seminiferous tubules, these are just these oval shapes or the circular shapes. It's just a cross section through this very long tube.
So that whole thing.
That whole thing, like this is one example, this is one example. It's just one very long tube, and we're seeing a slice through the whole testis. And when I say long, I mean a half mile per testis.
Really?
Men produce a lot of sperm. That's what we do. It's very tired. When I say a lot, I mean a half a billion. All right, so zooming in a little closer, we have the ring, the seminiferous tubule, and then you see all the little dots, the staining. Well, those are sperm cells just at different stages in their development.
And they're inside.
So they're embedded, they're in the wall of the seminiferous tubule. If we're actually pointed at the border, this is where you actually have the stem cells. The spermatogonia they're called. And as they develop, they move inwards. And now the mature sperm are in the lumen. But really, all of these dots that you see, stain a nuclei and these little lines, these are all sperm cells in some stage of development.
So that's spermatocytes.
Spermatocytes.
Are they like after cream? Kind of rising to the top? No.
Oh, in this
No,
case,
they're actual cells.
yeah, it's a full cell. So it's not just being
So it's
exceeded.
development, so it's moving towards that.
So as it develops, it moves inwards towards the lumen. And now you see this large cluster of cells. The open ring is seminiferous tubule, but when you see these little clusters, this is now a group of Leydig cells, interstitial cells.
Interstitial cells.
What?
So Leydig or interstitial,
So the cluster of cells with no lumen.
yeah, cluster of cells with no lumen, we're looking at a group of interstitial cells. When you have the lumen, that's the key to know that it's seminiferous tubule. All right, so let's move across, and you see all of these tubules and clusters of interstitial cells. there's many more sections of the seminary tubules, and I have to search around to see the interstitial cell clusters.
What are crystals? What are they?
Interstitial cells? Interstitial cells produce testosterone. We zoom in really close on the light. We can see something. We don't really kind of have to tell what does that look like to you in terms of what tissue? Yeah, within the border of the epididymis, yeah, we definitely have that columnar shape. And what do you see on the edge here? Yeah, it has cilia. So in the epididymis, that's a location that has cilia. So we'll go back up here. So that's a little trait we can look for. There's cilia in epididymis. Because at this point, sperm cells cannot move on their own. They have to be pushed along by the cilia. They have to be pushed through the epididymis. So these are a bunch of sperm cells right here. You can't make it out because they're so tiny. Sperm cells are the smallest human cells. So this is just a big cluster, and they get pushed along by the cilia.
So sperm cells get produced in both the testes and the
They're created in the testes, and then there's like temporary storage and modification in the epididymis. Epididymis that will lead to the ductostephrins. They're on their way out. All right, so that was this slide. And what do we have next? Okay, what do we need for the other business? Here we're starting with the wide view of this ovary. And this slide, it's an ovary from a cat. And we're using this, of course, because, cats, dogs, they give birth to litters, large groups. So we see so many follicles. And we'll look around and you can see there's a lot of detail just on this slide. So let's start out, we'll go through the list. So there's that term again, the tunica albuginea. Yeah, that'll still work, that'll still fine. So we're looking at, we gotta look at the edge. Zoom in a little closer. Okay, so you notice we're at the very edge of the ovary. And it's not the absolute surface. The absolute surface is actually simple squamous epithelium. So just slightly deeper in this area. That's the correct location for this tunic. So just deep to that kind of darker purple line. So of course now we're in the organ. So moving beyond the tunic, you see the term ovarian cortex. There's a lot of terms under that. So of course the cortex is the superficial part of the organ. And as you move around the cortex, that's where we see all these different eggs here. Or if you go deeper in, that's where you see follicles. These larger structures. So the eggs and these bigger follicle structures, these are located in the cortex.
That's still the cortex?
If you have a follicle, it's got to be the cortex. Whereas you see the term ovarian medulla, that's now an area that lacks any eggs or follicles. So as I get into this region here, medulla lacks any of those follicles. See that appearance? When you see the follicles, now we're in the cortex. And just a quick picture. I think it's even highlighted. So the area that contains the follicles, the area that lacks any follicles is the medulla. And you have this image on the blackboard. Or here's, of course, if you were looking at the cortex.
Wait, can you show us on that one that you just were at, the tunica?
The tunic, right in this area where I have the magnifying glass. Yeah, let's just see, what is number 2? Or even closer.
Okay.
So now continuing with the cortex, we have the primordial follicles. And that's actually what you're seeing right here, just deep to the tunic. And it's just a huge number of these little eggs, so ultimately will actually only a few of them actually develop to a follicle stage. Just deep to the tunic, so very close to the surface of primordial follicles. Very close to the surface. And here you can see just many of these primordial follicles.
And that's the stage before it becomes a primary follicle.
Now, before primary, it's primordial.
And as they mature, does it get deeper?
They go deeper in, and then, of course, the egg has to be released completely out of the ovary.
Well, if they age and they go to the center of the ovary, how do they escape?
Pulls a huge number of them. So now, in comparison, we're going over to a tertiary follicle, also known as mature or Graphian. And they are really distinct because we're going to see this crescent shape inside. And this is an example, it's too close. So still in the cortex, this whole thing here is a mature follicle, a Graphian follicle, a tertiary follicle. Those are all different names for it. And as I mentioned, it has this distinct crescent-shaped space inside. And here, we're now looking at the next term an oocyte contained within this entire mature follicle.
Is that what they refer to as secondary follicle?
Yes. Well, not secondary follicle. This is small ones here. This is the tertiary, aka mature follicle. Let me see a good view of the oocyte.
The oocyte is inside the mature follicle?
Yes, I'm going to a different slide. That tertiary follicle, it forms this structure here called a corpus luteum. And our slides just have a isolated corpus luteum. But I do want to show you just how big it is. And then we'll go back to our slide. We've got a chain. Doesn't quite fit on this view here. So let's go over this way. Well, that's our next lecture. So altogether, starting out with primordial follicles, and those are actually all the eggs that a woman's born with. Primordial follicles. When a woman begins menarche, when she starts her reproductive cycle, well, a number of those primordial follicles each month can develop into primary, get bigger. Just a few go to secondary follicles, and usually just one mature follicle, a big one with a crescent shape, each cycle, unless you're going to have possibly paternal twins. Once that mature follicle undergoes ovulation, the oocytes eject it out, push out of the ovary. And at that point, the fimbriae, those little branches actually move to guide the egg into the uterine tube. And we learned the ampulla portion of the uterine tube. Well, the sperm cells travel through the vagina, the cervix, body, go into the uterine tubes. And typically, the sperm cells fertilize the egg at the ampulla.
So right after this,
After the incubation.
Okay, but back to the oocyte in the tertiary follicle. So it's developing in the tertiary follicle, and then does it leave with the tertiary follicle, or does it leave it there behind, and that's what becomes the corpus luteum?
Exactly. This would be inside of the uterus, like inside of the uterine cavity, just the internal space. And now that internal layer, now we're viewing the endometrium. Just kind of moving across the endometrium. You can see now the various endometrial glands. You can see there's various shapes. In fact, the appearance of the glands, the shape of the glands, it really changes as the endometrium grows and develops throughout the uterine cycle. So you see some of these have like an S curve to it, or various shapes, but we're all within the area of the endometrium. And you see various endometrial glands.
Was that as zoomed out as you can get right now to get an overview?
Yes, for this microscope. And now spreading across the endometrium. So we're starting to see this transition. Let's just go in really close to verify. So it's not cardiac, it's not skeletal, but it's smooth muscle. The tissue is smooth muscle. The layer is called myometrium. So we'll be sure to make that distinction. Tissue, smooth muscle. The layer, myometrium. It's called myometrium. And we're now kind of meeting up with the endometrium, myometrium.
so are gland structures.
Yeah. Yeah, let's put it on for a wider view. Yeah, so definitely that perinetrium trimmed off. But we have myometrium, endometrium. There's various endometrial glands, and we have to go in close to see that smooth muscle. On this picture, so the smooth muscles are starting. Yeah.